Welcome into episode 333 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Peru and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, we have always things to talk about here in the Skate Podcast regarding hockey, whether it's December, July, everything in between. Bridget, I want to throw it to you quickly because with August and September still to come and go before the season begins, we do have some things planned here on the podcast to get us through to opening night.
Yeah, so we were trying to come up with ideas on, different themes of different podcasts, and we decided that we're going to, on 2 series so far, that we're going to have coming out starting end of July and then going into August and then maybe even into September, but thinking of having a 3-part guest series, and we're still working on that, but we will definitely think we want Razor on for one of them. So we would just need an all goalie day, I think, like maybe just an all goalie pod, and he can help us with that. So yeah,
well, they do still have a certain goalie that may or may not be signed by then. So
I know. See, we'll try to time it for that, but we won't know. Because who knows? Swayman could sign in September, and the series is going to be in August. So we might not know yet, but we know we don't know. And then we also,
Razor also will have like good insight on Brandon Bussi too, because he's actually like he's worked with him a little bit and knows his game pretty well. And obviously, he's a player people are going to be watching, seeing if he can beat out Korpisalo.
Yeah, and Korpisalo is probably the person we've talked about least in this offseason in terms of, the guys that they got. Like, we talked a lot about Lindholm and Zadorov, but Korpisalo, we went over it originally when Allmark got traded, but I think we should probably revisit him and what Razor thinks of him, because Razor obviously has better analysis of what he could be versus what we've seen from him so far. So we definitely want to get him on during I think it's going to be a 3-part guest series. And then we also want to do bring this back for the summer, which is What If Wednesdays. And basically, guys, this will just be different scenarios. It could be going back as far as like what would have happened if the Bruins didn't trade Phil Kessel, to something that happened last season, or just any sort of weird what if, or even like I was thinking even like a rule change what if, like what if I don't know, just change.
Yeah, or maybe even like looking forward, like like what if Fabian Lysell is ready to be a second line? Like it could even be something like that.
Yeah, so What If Wednesdays, we're going to be starting that this upcoming Wednesday.
Like all good podcasts, we just stole an idea from another podcast here in the Odyssey WEI family, because the Six Rings podcast with Andy Hart and Fitzy already does this.
We should get them on.
Yeah, we just do a we can answer their football what if, and they can try to answer our hockey one.
Guys, I wish I could say originality was something that everybody had, but let's be honest, everything that's ever been created has been inspired or tweaked or modified from something before them. So
what about this? This was an original, and I'm sorry, but nobody ever did that before. Okay.
Yeah. Can you put that back up real quick, Bridget? Just want to.
Yeah, it's Scott's popcorn head.
So I did have some recently. It's a little buttery though. It's a little too buttery for my liking. I have to.
You like it with extra salt and extra butter.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Just saying.
So to tag on to that, Bridget,
we're taking submissions. Yeah.
Yes, I was just gonna say that. Yes, exactly. You can keep going. Yep.
Yeah. So we'll take listener submissions for if you think you have a good what if question to talk about. So that'll be send those in before Wednesdays, because we will be posting those, probably recording Tuesday night and then posting Wednesday morning our What If Wednesdays.
That's so. Just to clarify, that would be next Wednesday, because not tomorrow, which is when they'll be dropping this. Because we're not dropping this today; we're dropping this tomorrow, right?
Yes, yeah, next week.
Okay. So before we continue on to the rest of the episode, I want to throw it over to Scott for a few minutes too.
So there was a sad death over the weekend in the Bruins media family, and that was Mike Loftus, who covered the Bruins for nearly 40 years for the Patriot Ledger out of Quincy, which, sadly, in like a changing media landscape, Patriot Ledger maybe doesn't register with some younger people as a giant of coverage, but once upon a time it absolutely was, and he was, as it relates to the Bruins, he was the biggest reason why. He used to, along with the Globe and Herald, was one of the outlets that traveled everywhere for a long time until I think like the late 90s or early 2000s. And then he continued to cover the team for another 20 years after that. But yeah, I'll point people to a really great tribute to Mike, written by Mick Pelagio, another veteran of the beat in Boston Hockey Now. He posted that over the weekend. Mick knew Mike certainly a lot better than I did. They, covered the team together for a long, long time. But my memories of Mike start when I started covering Bruins games when I was young, in college or just out of college. And what stood out to me was that he was one of the veterans who actually made an effort to get to know me and checked in on me and talked to me. And as I think we all know, that's not the case for everyone in this business. And I don't even necessarily think of it as a bad thing if there's, an older writer or whatever who doesn't go out of their way to get to know every young reporter. I don't know, sometimes you're just busy, you have stuff going on, whatever, you're just in your own world. But Mike did, and you remember the people who do that. He was always very funny. I think anyone who's had a tribute to him on social media this weekend has mentioned that. I believe both of his kids are comedians. I know his daughter is a fairly famous comedian, but I think his son's a comedian as well. So that clearly ran in the family. But yeah, it's a sad day. I always enjoyed seeing him around, and not that I was one of the beat writers who was super close to him, because he retired in 2020, and I was kind of I'd always covered the Bruins for, since 2010, 11, but not really in a beat capacity. It was more kind of in and out. And that was kind of right when I started really showing up full time, was kind of post COVID. So, but even still, obviously saw him a lot and just always enjoyed talking to him. And so rest in peace to Mike.
Yeah, I just missed him because, like you said, he retired the year that I started. So, which was during the pandemic when you couldn't really talk to anyone anyway. So I must have just missed him.
Yeah, obviously sending our thoughts to his friends and family. And ultimately, when you move on from this world and people have nothing but great things to say about you, and that you were treated with respect by them, and that you touch people's lives through his writing and whatnot, certainly a life very well lived. So a big loss for the Bruins beat community for sure, and the world in general. So Bridget, we have some residual mailbag questions left over from last week, if we wanted to jump into those and get this party started.
Yeah, so we had some questions from YouTube as well as some emails. So I'll start with this one first. This is the email that we got from Duncan from Hartford. He said, I'm fine with taking on Korpisalo. There's nothing wrong with having NHL experience in your backup goaltender position. My main concern is the potential loss of Bussi to waivers. I have two questions. Didn't the Bruins just sign him to a 2-way contract, or is that just for next season? And two, if Bussi is waivers eligible, is there a way to protect him? I would hate to lose such a promising young goaltending prospect. So those were his two questions, and we can explain his waiver situation and basically what the Bruins can do if they want to call him up.
Yeah, so Bussi does need waivers to be sent down. He is on a 1-year, 2-way contract, and this is a very common misconception, but 2-way does not mean that you can move a player up and down at will. 2-way just means he is paid a different salary in the AHL than he would be in the NHL. So all that's all, two ways only related to salary, has nothing to do with waivers. So the reason Bussi needs waivers, even though he has never played an NHL game, is because he's over 25 and he's been a pro for more than 1 year. So yeah, he would need waivers. There's no real way to protect him other than keeping him on the NHL roster. So either he beats out Korpisalo, and Korpisalo is the goalie you waive and send down to Providence because he would not be claimed off waivers. No one's going to pick up that contract. Or you keep 3 goalies, which we've seen some NHL teams do. Actually, quite a few last season started to make a habit of keeping 3 on the NHL roster. The Bruins, I don't believe, have ever done that outside of like the kind of unique COVID season where you had like the taxi squad and all that. But that would be another option. I can't say I really see them doing that, but it's on the table.
Yeah, and because Bussi's salary is so low that like it's not a cap issue. If you wanted to do it, it's just like a logistic. What does Monty want to keep, up? But I guess it is a solution because the question was, if he's up, like how do you keep him from getting claimed off waivers? Well, you either just have to hope other teams, like he clears waivers and nobody takes him, or do what Scott said and it's unusual, but keep the 3 goalies.
And I'm glad that Scott, you mentioned or clarified what a 2-way contract truly means, because it's a very, very easy misconception and totally understandable why one would assume that you can talk between the minors and the NHL. But another misconception that people might not know is that Brandon Bussi, and you mentioned this to Bridget in our group chat.
I thought he was younger, so I was like, oh no, he's still exempt from waivers for another season, right? And then Scott was like, no, and I was like, oh, and then I had to look up his age because he's 26, and I thought he was like 22 for some reason. Like
Brandon Bussi, older than Jeremy Swayman. I just don't know if everybody knows that, and it's not saying that he's not still a young goalie that you want to keep, but it's just worth noting he's not 22, 23 for what it's worth. It's even 24. He is younger than Swayman.
Yeah, like even Duncan referencing, promising young goalie prospect. I mean, most people who rate prospects don't consider him a prospect anymore because he's aged out. Different people have different definitions, but a lot of like prospect analysts kind of cap it at 25. Like once you turn 25, you're not a prospect, whether you're still in the AHL or not.
And the reason why, like even I thought he was, still younger or like younger along in his development and actually physically younger, was because he finished, like not everybody that's a prospect finishes the entirety of college and then plays in the AHL. Like sometimes guys leave early and or sometimes they don't spend as long in the AHL, but yeah, the fact that he was 26, just because it was something I hadn't even thought to look up in a while. Like, I don't know when the last time I would have looked at this would have been. I was like, oh, all right. Well, that makes sense that he has to clear waivers, because the rule is, and if people are confused about when people are exempt from waivers and when they're not, it's mostly tied to age. So if you're 25 plus, basically you have to clear waivers.
Yeah, kind of like there's sort of like a formula of age and pro experience that the older you get, the less pro experience you need to be waivers eligible. It can get a little complicated, but yeah, for 25 plus, very simply, it's just if you've been a pro for more than a year, you're eligible for waivers. And he now has 2 pro seasons under his belt. So, yeah, I mean, look, regardless, like, yeah, you don't want to lose Bussi for nothing, but keep in mind, too, that most teams have their goalie situation set, or at least what they think is going to be their goalie situation. So, it's very possible that he would not be claimed on waivers either. Just because someone would need to be convinced that he's going to be better than one of the two goalies they were planning on keeping for opening night. And there's so many players that hit waivers at that time. If we're talking about Bussi not making the opening night roster and getting sent down then, there are so many players that hit waivers in that 24 hours when your opening night roster is due that more guys make it through than you would think. I remember even in past years, people thought, oh, Oscar Steen will get claimed because, I don't know, he's played NHL games and showed a little bit of promise, and oh no, Oscar Steen didn't get claimed. More guys clear than you might expect.
But definitely a valid question, especially when you think of the scenario that the Bruins are in coming into the season, which is that maybe Korpisalo isn't the answer for their backup. Maybe he is. That's such a big question mark that you go, okay, well, what if he's not? Well, then you look to Brendan Bussi and have to try to make the most out of the goaltending situation that you have now, which is actually the other question that we got. We have two more, but the next question that we got was from Upchuck the Boogie on YouTube. And it was just a comment. It was Bruins screwed up their goalie situation. So, guys, obviously this goalie situation is not as good as it was last year. You don't have a Vezina goalie in your tandem anymore. The Swayman Allmark tandem was one of the best goalie rotations of all time. Obviously, it takes a step back when you trade Allmark. But did they screw it up so bad that they're going to take a massive step back at the position? Or do you think because Swayman is as good as he is, everything ends up being okay?
Well, I guess without further context, I'm wondering what part Upchuck thinks they screwed up. Was just trading Allmark period a screw up? Was taking Korpisalo back the screw up? Is it Swayman's contract situation he means that they're screwing up? I guess blanket answer, I don't think they've screwed anything up. Yeah, I made it clear at the time I didn't want to take Korpisalo back, or I at least think it should have been 50% retained instead of 25%. But whatever, I still think, you're going to have one of the best goalies in the NHL once Swayman's contract gets finalized. And whether it's Korpisalo or Bussi or even Michael DiPietro, who never gets talked about, but I would not completely rule out of this conversation, I think you'll have a capable backup. I don't think Korpisalo is going to be as bad here in 25 games or 30 games as he was in Ottawa trying to play 60 plus. I think this will be a much better situation for him. So I don't really see where the screw up is, but I don't think Upchuck's alone on that though. I've heard that elsewhere. So I'm wondering if you guys, think differently.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if Swayman doesn't re-sign, then it's a problem, because then you can sit there and say, well, the Bruins traded the one goalie that was still under contract. But I just don't think that's going to be the reality. And so for that reason, going forward next year, okay, just having two number one goalies and having that goalie rotation, does that damn the Bruins next year? No, I think Scott said it before. You might lose a couple of games that you probably would have won last year based off goaltending, because the goaltending saved their ass last year. I also think the Bruins roster outside of goaltending is going to be better next year. Overall, I think. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a dramatic drop off to the point where they're not going to make the playoffs. And when you get to the playoffs, as we saw, you're pretty much going with one goalie. And I think this Bruins team will be a better built team in the postseason next year. So I really don't care about the extra couple points in the regular season. I don't care about, even if the Bruins have to get a little bit uncomfortable down the stretch and not have a playoff spot solidified in December or January. If they have to take it to February let them sweat a little bit. I don't care. I think at the end of the day, as long as they make the playoffs with this roster, I think they're better. They have a higher ceiling than last year's roster when you consider the fact that last year's team with Allmark and Swayman had Allmark on the bench throughout the postseason.
And the fact that you ran it through twice, like you didn't give the goalie tandem in the playoffs really like the full chance, but the fact that you couldn't figure out what to do with such a good goalie tandem and make it work and help your team win, make it further in the playoffs, I think shows you that they either weren't willing to, didn't know how to, didn't think it was the right thing to do. And in that case, it doesn't help you to have both of them once postseason comes around, because we saw that the gaps were elsewhere, and some of that money that was tied up with Allmark is now free to go to a forward. Obviously, Korpisalo's cap hit is $5 million for the Bruins. Is $3 million for the Bruins, and Allmark's was $5 million. So it does give you a little bit of extra cap space. You probably didn't want to have a goalie signed at, we think Swayman's going to be like right around $8 million, right, guys? Like between $7 and $8 million. And then another goalie for $5 million. That would be, which was what Allmark's contract was, that would be a lot tied up in goalies. So most teams do not have that amount of money tied up in goaltending. And the reason why they don't is because you need that cap space for a more balanced roster in front of the net. So I think that's what they had to do. If the issue with what got screwed up is, and I've even heard this, like keeping the wrong goalie. Like some people believe that the Bruins should have kept Allmark instead of Swayman. I don't really think that was ever the idea. They would have had to have traded him before he became a restricted free agent, when they could have gotten something for him. And I think that keeping Swayman was always the plan and was the smarter of the two plans, because he's younger. And I don't know, I think he's got a really bright career ahead of him. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that changed about the goalie situation in the last two seasons. And then now, like coming into this, we'll say, like from the last year Bergeron played to the Centennial season to this upcoming season, there's been quite a bit of drama at the goalie position.
Definitely not. But I will say, I still think the Bruins are, they're in a good spot. They will be, especially when Swayman signs. So I'm not too worried about them.
Yeah, like Swayman at worst is going to be a top 6 or 7 goalie in the NHL. I mean, he was last year. I think he finished 5th in Vezina voting. So, like, you don't have a bad goalie situation as long as you have one of those goalies. So the only way that you really screw it up is, again, if somehow disaster strikes and they don't get him signed, or it turns out he can't handle the true number one workload and, whatever, his game falls off. But I don't really see that happening, because, again, I don't think they're going to ask him to jump from 41 games to 61. I think it's more likely he goes from like 41 to 51. Like you add 10, and I don't really think he should have much of an issue handling that.
Yeah, and the indication that seems like the most likely situation is because they did get Korpisalo. They did get an NHL backup rather than just being like, okay, Brendan Bussi, it's him. Like then you would know Swayman was going to have to take on a big chunk of extra games than he had previously. But because they got the NHL backup, I think he's going to have he'll be able to grow slowly at the games without it being too much of an issue. And hopefully, wear and tear isn't an issue either with playing a few more games. So anyway, we got one more leftover question from our mailbag, which, by the way, keep sending them in because we're going to do another mailbag episode soon. This one was from Kaylee on YouTube. She said, I'd love to know what you think about the Bruins schedule. Also, is Monty, I don't know what this means, under the pump to get out of the first round, or is his job safe regardless of what happens this season? And will this be Marshy's final season? So there's a few there. So I'm going to start with the schedule part. Is there a game that you guys are looking forward to on the Bruins schedule this season? I can tell you the one I'm not looking forward to, which is opening night, which is in Florida for the
Why
banner
are you not
raising.
looking forward to that?
Because
That's
it's
a
the
great
banner
opener.
raising night. You have to sit
Yeah,
there.
that's like the best possible way to open the season.
No,
Like,
it's not.
Here's your
The team
motivation.
that knocked you. No. The team that knocked you out of the playoffs. You
Yeah.
watch them raise a banner. That's the best way you can start the season. Absolutely not.
Yeah. Reminder
No.
right
Oh,
off
yeah.
the bat what's at stake and
Oh
what you
my
have to
God.
do.
No, that's not. That's the worst way to start a season, which has happened to the Bruins a few times because I think the year the Capitals won, they were the first game the Bruins played was against the Capitals for their banner raising. And that game didn't go great. If I remember, then they lose like 8-1. I don't know.
Well, the season went well though. They went to the Stanley Cup Finals and were one game away from the Cup.
Yes, they did. Oh, are we saying that because this is how they're starting their season, they're going to go to the
Well,
Cup?
I think if there was no correlation between the teams, I can see it being annoying. But I do think, look, for fans, sure, it's going to be annoying to put on Nesson or whatever broadcast is showing the game, and you finally get to watch hockey for the first time in 5 months, and you have to watch the Panthers raise their banner. But if you're the Bruins, like, this is the team that's directly in front of you. They have knocked you out the last 2 years, in particular 2 years ago when that should have been the Bruins that went on a cup run. So I think it's, to Scott's point, he just said it, it's the ultimate motivation, and it's right there in front of you. This is a team that we have to get ahead of, and they also have had success at the expense of our failures. So I think from a competitive standpoint, these guys are professional athletes. This is gonna, I think it's an amazing way for the Bruins to jump right into the season.
Yeah. Now, what I don't like is a few days later, they play the Panthers again at home, and it's a 1:00 game on a Monday on Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day. Not a fan of that. That Bruins Panthers is a primetime matchup now. That's not a 1:00 holiday Monday game. So I don't like that. I like that the Bruins home openers against Montreal.
Scott,
That
they
checks
play the
out.
Panthers. They play the Panthers on a. They have a few matinee games with the Panthers. They're not in prime time. Like there's two games.
But like a Saturday is different. Like that's probably going to be picked up by national TV.
I don't like 1:00 games. I'm just going to put that out there.
So I mean, I do just selfishly because I'm not writing till 2 a.m. after, but they do not bring in the best crowds.
So what games are we looking forward to? Because we've just gone into some that we're not. Scott, when's the Montreal trip? Where's our trip? Where are we going?
So here's another thing I don't like. They only go to Montreal once, and it's April 3rd. They don't go to Montreal until 6 months into the season. That's insane.
What do you mean they go to Montreal once? Don't they play each other 4 times?
3. They're one of the division opponents. They only played 3 times this year.
That is absurd. That should never be the case. Oh, the Bruins Canadiens rivalry has been down the last 10 years. Let's just give them 3 games again. That's bullshit. Yeah. Pardon my French, Bridget.
It's fine. So that's gonna really delay our trip. That's
Well, I'm going to Montreal on Halloween for Bruce Springsteen. So.
Ooh.
And you didn't invite me? Spooky.
You're welcome to come if you want.
I was a lot of fun. No, Scott was the one that was fun because it was his birthday. But I secretly brought him a birthday crown. And I have some great pictures. But I always look forward to the Montreal game because I've gone the last 2 years, the last 2 seasons. When I went in April, which Scott and I got lucky, we got pretty decent weather this past March. But when I went in April, it was beautiful. It's 80 degrees. Me and one of the other writers hiked up Mount Royal, and it was just beautiful. So you know what? I'm happy it's in April at least. I wish they, had the 2 games there, but April works for me. So hopefully it works for Scott. Brian, you coming this year?
Sure. Yeah, I'll definitely go. So and by go, I mean, I'll probably just watch it from my house. But I'll be honest, I haven't had a chance to really fully analyze their schedule. But I don't know. I'm trying to see if there's any month where there seems to be a ton of home games or away games. February, they only have 1 away game. I'm trying to look at March and April as you get into the playoffs there. They got a lot of away games, 5 away games at the end of March. But then as the playoffs get around the corner, it's just back and forth, road and away. So I don't know if her question had to do with like travel. I know each team has like, well, I don't know. I know they calculate like distance traveled by team, but I think, I don't know. I mean,
Bruins
that's
are
no different
like
than every other
middle of
year.
the pack. Bruins are middle of the pack this year. I actually just saw that the other day. I think
But
they're
how
like
does that-
17th in terms of total miles
But
traveled.
how does that vary all too much year to year? Because you still play every Western Conference team home and away. I mean, I guess you can play certain teams in your conference at their rank more than they come to you. Like Montreal, for example, is coming to Boston more than they. Okay, so I guess that's how it works.
Yeah, and it might, you might have, maybe you have three game Western road trips instead of 2, 4 or 5 game ones. It's like you might have to make an extra trip, that kind of thing. Maybe you go to Florida an extra time this year or something. But yeah, a couple others I had circled. October 19th will be the Bruins' first trip to Utah. So you get that really early on. Bad news for anyone who might have been planning to try to go out there and make a ski or snowboarding trip out of it, because I don't think even Utah is going to have much on the ground on October 19th. And then another one I circled, November 26th, Canucks in Boston. So lots of former teammates playing their old teams. We'll get to see DeBrusk, Heinen, Forbert, but obviously DeBrusk will be the big one. It'll be interesting to see what kind of reception he gets. And, for the Bruins side, Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov facing their old team.
Yeah, that was such a weird offseason to think like how much those teams swapped. The familiarity there. It was kind of crazy to see all the free agents that Boston had go there. I also, where my mind goes to this too is like, what matchup do I want to see the Bruins go into with their new roster versus like some really changed rosters, right? Like I want to see what they look like. I'm interested to see them play Tampa without Stamkos. We kind of talked a little bit about Stamkos the last episode. I think there's a few teams that had quite a bit of turnover that I'm like, I wonder how they match up now. I want to see a new look in the rivalry.
Well, so to that point, I was just looking up when they're playing Nashville and Boston, because Nashville's a game in Boston that would be good to see, because you see Steven Stamkos come in with Nashville. You just mentioned him, and Jonathan Marchessault is obviously in Nashville, and they've had some good turnover, and I think they're going to be a real player out west. So you don't see Nashville and Boston until March 4th, but you do see them play Nashville. I think October 22nd on the road. So that's one that's interesting too. And yeah, Bridget, you're right to bring up.
That is a good trip too. Like if you're trying to travel to a game, like I've contemplated in the past going to Nashville for a road, for like going to Nashville for a Bruins game there. Which is obviously, if you've been to Nashville, it's a fun time. If you haven't been, maybe you want to go check it out and you want to time it when there's a Bruins game. That would be good. And like Brian said, that's October 22nd. So I mean that's a good one if you're looking for a road trip to go to. Nashville is not the most expensive place to travel to. Kind of easy to get to, and the rink is right on the main stretch with all of the different bars with all the country music. So it's all right there.
Not a Bruins take. Actually, Scott, you go because you're probably still talking Bruins.
Wait, can I say one last thing about Nashville?
Sure.
So the reason why it's a good town to take a hockey trip in is because a lot of the time the guys do go out in Nashville and they have 2 days before the game that they probably will the night before be out on the town. And I saw one night I was out in Nashville, and this was pre-pandemic in 2019, where pretty much the entire Pittsburgh Penguins were out. The same bar that I was at, Sidney Crosby was there, Phil Kessel was there, Jake Getzel was there. Like they were out till like 2-3 in the morning. And I saw Mike Babcock out the day before because Toronto was just in town too. So it's just an interesting place. You might actually meet some players. Like they like to go out just like everyone else down on that main stretch. I saw the Penguins at, I think it was Keith Urban's bar, but just go searching. You might find someone.
It's also funny that the Bruins are going to be going from Utah to Nashville because Utah
You can't even drink there.
famously just not a nightlife scene. So you better believe players are going to be like, let's get out of here, like ASAP, like get us to Nashville for the next couple of days. A couple other quick notes for me. You mentioned like the end of the season. It looks like the Bruins have fewer Saturday, Sunday back-to-backs. This last year was crazy. It was like almost every weekend I think they had 5 weekends in a row of back-to-backs at one point. And this year I see 1, 2, 3 over the entire course of March and April. So like that's not bad at all. The other last thing I want to highlight, first month in general is tough for the Bruins. Like they're going to be tested right out of the gate. Remember last year we were like, geez, we don't really know because they haven't played anyone yet. Like they had that West Coast trip where it was like they're just kind of racking up wins over bad teams. Well, this year they play 11 games in October, and 8 of them are against teams that were in the playoffs. And then even of the 3 that aren't, one's a rivalry game with Montreal, one's at Utah, which I think is going to be a very improved team that I see a lot of people already kind of being a trendy playoff sleeper pick. Flyers, I think, are probably going to stink. So that's like the one real bad one. But yeah, I mean, at Florida, Kings come here, Panthers come here, at Colorado, at Nashville, Dallas is here, Toronto's here, at Carolina. Like you're gonna get some real tests right out of the gate.
That's a good point, Scott. Very good point. Quickly, non-Bruins schedule related, the World Cup of Hockey or Four Nations Face-Off. Is that a game or a weekend that you two are intending on going to live, whether it's covering EEI or?
That's another trip to Montreal right there.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, I'll definitely do the games in Boston. I don't know if I'll be going to Montreal.
Come on.
Have you really thought about, Scott, just how insane that hockey will be? Because also, unlike the World Cup of Hockey back in 2016, these players have been off for the summer training, getting ready for the regular season, but these guys will be in mid-season form, literally. So the hockey should be, similar to the Olympics back in the day, right? So, the hockey should be the highest of caliber. Pretty cool. So Bridget and Scott, I did have before we jump into the athletic thing, I did have a question that popped into my mind. I put out a poll on Twitter last week asking fans who they thought was going to be second on the Bruins in scoring next year behind David Pastrnak, obviously health permitting. And I gave the options Brad Marchand, Elias Lindholm, Pavel Zacha, and a fourth option, which was just a write-in option. And I'm curious if you guys are surprised at the results, which was 67% of voters believe that Elias Lindholm will be second on the Bruins in scoring. 24% said Brad Marchand, so it's a pretty big gap there. 5% said Zacha, 4% said others, with a couple of votes for Trent Frederick. It's worth noting, I do agree with the results. I believe Pavel Zacha will be second, Elias Lindholm will be second on the Bruins in scoring behind David Pastrnak, mainly because he's playing with David Pastrnak. And I do think he'll find a new lease on life in a heightened role in Boston. But it's worth noting that aside from David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, Pavel Zacha, Charlie Coyle, and Charlie McAvoy all had more points than Elias Lindholm last year. And in many cases, it was significant. So I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on that. And if you feel like Brad Marchand's getting a little bit of disrespect there, or if you think that kind of seems about right.
He probably is, but I think part of it, and I would agree with voters if this is their thinking, is, Marchand at this point in his career probably tops out around 70 points. Last year he was just under that. And Lindholm should have the potential to top that. Playing with Pastrnak, he's topped that number a few times in his career. Obviously, not last year, as you mentioned. His numbers were way down. Starting the year in a bad situation in Calgary, on a team that fell out of it and eventually just started selling off and rebuilding. And then in Vancouver, he moved around. They tried him on wing. He was third line center. Like, not really until the playoffs did he actually settle into kind of like an actual favorable spot in the lineup. So I would agree with the voters. I'd go with Lindholm being second on the team in scoring, because I feel like his floor to me should be like 25 goals, 40 assists, and right away that puts him in 65 points and right in the mix with your Marchand, Zaga, Coils from last year. But I think he has the potential to top 30 goals, top 40 assists, top 70 points. And I don't know if anyone else up front really does.
Well, so the only thing I'm going to say is to answer the, is that kind of snubbing Brad Marchand thing, is that you have to go way back to find a season where Marchand was not one or in the first 2 point scorers on the Bruins. Like, he has been in the top 2 point scorers on the Bruins for a long time. Pre-pandemic, I haven't even gotten back as far. He's just up there. Like, he's had 80-point seasons for several times since then. So it's kind of hard to say, like, Elias Lindholm, who had fewer points than him last year, is going to pass him. I think it could easily still be Marchand next season in second place, which I feel like that would be a good thing, because it means he probably hasn't seen a drop off in the part of his career where you're kind of watching to see, does he still have it? So if he can be second in scoring, that's probably a good sign for the Bruins. So I don't know. He's kind of who I would go with, just because he's proven to be able to do it a lot. And I know that the thinking being put anyone next to Pastrnak and their point production is going to go up. But if you're the Bruins, you're hoping that you get production from Marchand too.
Well, and I think for me, the biggest surprise was Zaga getting 5% of the votes, and there was a couple hundred people that chimed in. So it wasn't like there was enough of a sample size, because Zaga too is going to get that rub from Pastrnak, as he already has, and he's going to be on the wing, so he'll be playing less of a defensive role up and down the ice. So yeah, I just felt like again, my vote would have gone to Lindholm, but I think some of the write-ins were Frederick and Lysell got one, Merkulov got one, Coyle got one. I mean,
you're kidding, right?
No, I'm not. I mean, you got to kind of, in my opinion, you got to make the team before you get my vote. But hey, fans, to Scott's point earlier, we have a potential what if in the future. What if Lysell pops off? We just don't know these things. So I'm not going to try to predict the future. I just try to make some educated guesses based off what I've seen.
I'll tell you what, if Fabian Lysell second in scoring, either something has gone unbelievably right or unbelievably wrong.
Everyone else on the team has -5 points. No.
Oh gosh. But yeah.
And we'll have to circle back and apologize to this person, or get them a beer because ask them for financial advice because they might be psychic. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hey, look, the opportunity is there, right? I mean, in past years, if there was a young forward and he was trying to break the lineup as I was surprised Matt Poitras didn't get any write-ins for that matter. But Poitras's
last year he would have. Well, depending on when you asked last year, I bet he would have if we had asked like end of preseason or like after the first.
Definitely not in July.
I mean, I will say if Poitras is playing on the third line, and let's just say, because if Lysell makes the team, or Merkulov, let's just call it Lysell, I'm not totally sold that the opening right now is second line right wing. I'm not sold it's going to him, right? Like he might be on a third line role. So I just, there's too many things to at least to start. There's too many things I have to see still. So I just can't really go there with those guys just yet.
Yeah. While we were talking about Marchand, because I think we're gonna get to this anyways, but found this interesting in The Athletic. This was posted today, actually, Tuesday. They did Hockey Hall of Fame tiers which active NHL players are on course for induction. The first tier they have is they could retire today and make it. And in that tier, they have Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, Evgeny Malkin, Patrick Kane, Andrei Kopitar, Steven Stamkos, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, Nikita Kucherov, Eric Carlson, Victor Hedman. They have more than I thought, honestly, guys. I did not realize this before I started reading off the list. But Fleury, Bobrovsky, Quick, Vasilevsky. Tier 2 is right on the cusp, which they define as players in this tier already have an argument to be in the Hall of Fame right now, and they'll almost certainly get there with more time. And the first name listed there is Brad Marchand. I'll touch on just the other Bruins quickly. David Pastrnak is in tier 4, which is on track. If these players keep doing what they're doing, they'll be in. And Charlie McAvoy is in tier 5, which is check back in a few years, which they define as players who have had an excellent start to their career, but it's too soon to say they're definitely on track. What do you guys think of that?
I mean, I think they're fair. Like, I think that Pastrnak and McAvoy are probably right where they need to be. Marchand, by the fact that he's the first one listed in tier 2 means that you probably could have put him either way. And maybe they had thought about putting him in tier 1, like if he retired now, he'd make it. But more than likely, like he's still not more than likely going to make it tier essentially. So I think that that's probably fair for him as well, especially considering all the other names that you rattled off, that at least a few of that, like at least a good chunk of those would probably get in before him. I mean, there's a lot of really, really good players that were listed. So I think those are fair.
So tier 1 is they're Hall of Famer if they retire today.
Yeah.
Tier 2 is yes, pretty much debatable, but like pretty much just, whatever. Tier 4 was they're on the right trajectory. Keep doing what you're doing and you will be. Tier 5 is circle back. What was tier 3?
Yeah, what is tier 3?
Tier 3 is outside shots. These players all have a chance to make the Hall of Fame, but perhaps not a good one. Many will be bound for the Hall of Very Good. So these are
some examples?
These are like mostly older players who probably can't add enough to get there, like Claude Giroux, John Tavares, Jamie Benn, Corey Perry, Ryan O'Reilly, Ryan Suter, John Carlson. That's
Okay, so yeah, because I was gonna say, like, I mean, I think Pastrnak easily should be in tier 3. I mean, in my mind, but it seems like they kind of no, he's in tier 4, but I'm saying he should be in probably tier 3. But it seems like tier 3 is kind of a different set of rules. Maybe.
Yeah,
I was gonna say
it seems like tier 4. All those guys are going to be more likely than tier 4.
Yeah, I feel like that tier 3 should have been tier 5, right?
I guess they're probably just catering to like age or I don't know.
Well, I think what Bridget said is correct. I think they're all pretty fair. I think McAvoy certainly. I think he just has to get another level offensively. I think that's what is probably holding him back a little bit, and I think that's why they're saying circle back in a few years, and I think that's fair. I also think winning at the ultimate level, a Stanley Cup, certainly really helps anybody's Hall of Fame case, of course.
Well, Pastrnak, it would push everybody's level up a tier, basically.
Yeah, that would make Marchand a lock.
Mm-hmm.
If assuming it's say it's within the next 5 to 6 years, then it's happening with Pastrnak and McAvoy in their prime as probably the 2 best players on the team. So that would be a huge boost for all of them.
I mean, there's probably a couple of players in that tier 1 that don't have a cup, and because of that, I might have Marchand ahead of them. But that's nitpicking. I think the lists are pretty fair. I think McAvoy has things to prove still, but I think David Pastrnak is. I think yeah, I think he's going to be a sure thing when his career is over. Absolutely. I mean, there's a really solid chance that if he plays his whole career in Boston, that he will eclipse Johnny Busick as the team's leading goal scorer in franchise history, which we all know is 100 years and counting. So
Can I throw this out there? What do we think about Jeremy Swayman? Like, what kind of career would Jeremy Swayman have to, if he gets this big contract, like next 8 years or whatever? Like, what does he have to do to somehow make his way into the picture here, into any of the tiers?
He's going to be in tier 10. And I think the first asterisk in tier 10 is you can't be in a goalie rotation if you want to make the Hall of Fame. You got to have to kind of be the guy for a longer period of time. I joke, but he's just too young.
I mean, I guess if you look at like the other goalies here, like, so the locks are Marc-Andre Fleury, Sergei Bobrovsky, Jonathan Quick, Andrei Vasilevsky. All of them have won at least one cup, and I think they've all won at least one Vezina, right? Yeah, Fleury has. So yeah. So like start there. You got to get at least one of those, a Vezina or a cup. If you get both, you start to enter like lock territory. They have Connor Hellebuck on track. So he's got 2 Vezinas, but doesn't have a cup yet. So yeah, like I would say like Sergei Bobrovsky is probably on track even before this year because he had 2 Vezinas. Tuukka Rask is nowhere on here because he only has 1 Vezina, and well, obviously he's not active, but I don't think Tuukka Rask is going to be a Hall of Famer. He only has 1 Vezina and didn't win a cup as a starter. So I think you have to, or it's just like at the very least, there's going to be a lot of debate about Rask, and I don't think he's going to get in. So you have to at least exceed that. Like you got to either multiple Vezinas or multiple cups or one of each, and then you're going to start having the conversation.
Yeah, and I think that and the reason I bring up the goalie rotation thing is I think it's going to be difficult to acquire Vezina trophies if you're going up against guys that are having more of a workload than you. It seems like I am cutting out, so I'm going to stop talking.
You did a little bit, but we got the end of your thoughts. So, Bridget, did you have anything else you wanted to touch on here, or?
No, I feel like we got through pretty much everything else. We didn't answer all of Kaylee's question, but Brian is frozen, so I think we're good. Answer.
I guess to answer the end of Kaylee's question just quickly. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say we now got 2 Brians. I think it's fair to say that Montgomery is, could end up somewhere close to the hot seat. We all think he was probably going to get fired if they lost Game 7 to Toronto. So, yeah, you save your job, but that doesn't mean you're safe for another year, no matter what. This team has to play well. They have to be in the playoffs. They probably have to win a round. That's the kind of the base expectation for them. He's also in the final year of his contract, and we haven't really heard any news about an extension or if they've had discussions or anything like that. So, it's definitely fair to wonder about his job stats. And then Martian's final season, I don't think so. I think Brad Martian said himself that he's going to be a guy that's going to have to get dragged off the ice. Unlike, I think Patrice Bergeron wanted to retire while he was still playing at a pretty high level, while there's still maybe a little something in the tank. I think Martian's going to push it all the way till the end until he just literally can't do it anymore. And that's not going to be after this year.
No, that's just his personality as well.
Well, and Patrice Bergeron began his NHL career at 18, and by the time that he was, and then he had a season-ending concussion in 07-08, which I think all that happened before the age of Brad Marchand's rookie year. You know what I'm trying to say? Bergeron had been through a lot more at age 23 in the NHL than Brad Marchand had been when he burst onto the scene, I think at 22 or 23. So, I don't think Marchand's done after this year. I think he's going to take those team-friendly, maybe, annual, contracts, team-friendly to see, what they can do. But I think he's not going anywhere next year. or maybe even the year after. So, and as far as Montgomery goes, winning round 1 last year solidified his spot this year, which I know he's still in the contract. But yeah, I think if they go out in the first round next year, I wouldn't sleep peacefully if I were him. I think he would. A phone call could be coming, and I think he would expect that. So
Yeah,
I think you got to try to go further.
If you lose to the Leafs in the first round next year, not safe.
Yeah.
Also, if you do the same thing that has happened the last 2 seasons, which is you get a lead in the series and then you blow it, like they almost did that against the Leafs, like in the first round both years. Like you're up, you backslide, and in 2023 they don't make it to the next round. 2024 they barely make it to the next round. Thanks to Pasta, but like it's you can't keep doing that. You can't you got to finish a series. Like if you get up 3-1, like finish it the next game. You know what I mean? Like at some point you have to do that.
Bridget, we gotta mark this off because that's a great what if for a future What If Wednesday. What if the Bruins lost Game 7 to the Maple Leafs after Jim Montgomery called out David Pastrnak? What if Jim Montgomery's call out didn't work and the Bruins lose that game? Now the whole offseason could potentially be like, has the coach lost the room, the start? So that, to your point, it's just so fortunate that it worked out the way that it did, because it was ballsy, but it certainly wasn't. It was certainly lucky that it worked out that way for him too.
Yeah, I think what we would have had a full offseason of is what to expect from this new coach, because I think Montgomery was done if that had happened.
It would have been like, new coach, can he get the chemistry between Lindholm and Pasta, and can he work in the young players? And that's what we'd be talking about.
Pastrnak saved his job with that goal. No other way to put it. Okay. Sorry I cut out during the goalie talk, but I think you guys kind of covered it pretty well. And was there any other topics to get to?
No, I think that was it. But just reiterating that, send us your mailbag questions, and now send us in your what if scenarios if you have something that you want us to talk about, or you want to tell us your opinion about a scenario that kind of just like bothers you. Because we have a few that we've been chatting behind the scenes about, like, this one still gets me. So yeah, send those in to the email. What's the email, Scott? I really need to add a graphic for the email.
skatepod@weei.com.
It's literally Bridget, I'm with you. It's literally the easiest email, and I forget it every single time. That's why every time we do a mailbag, I go, Scott, we want to plug where it is, because I always forget what it is. And it's literally skatepod@weei.com.
Yeah, because I always forget if there's a but there's no the.
Right. Well, like in fairness, like because there is a the in our Twitter handle.
That's true.
Yeah.
So we'll give ourselves a break there.
weei.com, and it's not at Gmail, right? It's at weei.
Correct.
All right, there we go. We have it solved. Or tweet us, or comment on the YouTube.
Okay, so it's theskatepod@yahoo.com, right? That's what it is.
Or I'll give you Scott's address. You can mail them in to Lowell, and he'll read them.
Yeah.
The physical copy of the question.
We can give out Bridget's phone number. People can just text.
Oh no, God no.
So right now it's July 23rd, potentially the 24th if we release this tomorrow. So end of July through mid-September, our weekly episodes will consist of either a mailbag, a What If Wednesday, and or a guest interview, and probably 2 of the 3 every single week. So we'll need all of your assistance for that, and that'll be fun. It'll help us get to the regular season.
And then we're hoping September to have a player series where we get some quick, like 10 to 15 minute interviews with players, and targeting Lysell, want to really kind of catch up with him. Some of the younger guys I think would be good targets for us to get preseason. So we'll be trying to get, as the season is about to get underway, in September and in early October, try to grab some players and on their thoughts going into the season.
I can't wait. Bridget, Scott, any final words?
Nope, all good.
All righty. Well, thank you all very much for listening. We'll talk to you very soon. Have a great rest of your week. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
not in front of a screen, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.